So last but not least, we're finally on Silent Auditorium, the final mission in our LASO playlist. Now let's get this one over with. So when you first load into this level, you're already under siege by a bunch of different banished enemies, and there's going to be a bunch of different types of enemies here, ranging from jackals, elites, brutes, shade turrets, you name it, it's going to be here. So there's a lot to manage, and it seems overwhelming at first, but like I said, we're just going to be taking it nice and slow. But there is one thing to notice: if you hang around this front section a lot of the enemies near the front will start rushing towards you. So you can see there's just a large chunk of enemies right at the beginning. Luckily, most of them are just grunts and jackals with the one elite. And as you can see, I just threw my dynamo at the cluster of them and was able to kill most of them that way while they were stunned. Now you're going to need to make sure that you're staying kind of out of range of these shade turrets and out of line of sight until you're able to clear out enough of the front section to where you can shoot your 2 rockets from a distance and destroy them one by one. And see, I destroyed the 1 shade turret. I'm going in, going to kill some more enemies, and then once I'm done finishing off some of these guys, I'm going to go back and finish off the other one, since it's a little bit in a more awkward position. Now as you move up in this room, there's going to be more berserker brutes that you're going to have to worry about rushing towards you. And remember, berserker brutes will be able to see where you are at all times. They're not going to care that you're invisible. They're not going to give it, and they're just going to rush you. There's no way around them. You just have to deal with them right away. And you always just throw your dynamos at it, since there's just so many people there that you're really going to want to stun everyone imaginable. That way there's less people shooting at you, and you don't have to deal with like 30 people, 30 banished, constantly bombarding you. Now another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the brutes will have rocket launchers, so whenever you are visible to them, you want to make sure you're not just standing still, else you're just going to get blasted with a rocket, and you don't want that to happen. It will instantly kill you. So you want to be moving around consistently and staying out of their line of sight until you're ready to kill them. So you can see now I'm in this little corner. I'm in a good spot to start shooting at the shade turret. One thing to keep in mind though is from this spot in particular, you are in range of the shade turret, so if he is already locked onto you, you're going to take some damage. So just make sure you're able to pop in and out quick enough before it's able to kill you, and make sure you're going to be able to melee another person with your sword in order to regain your shields again. But once you're able to finally finish clearing out that room, and you see I even accidentally left one person here, one last brute I'm going to finish off. He just threw a grenade right at himself, which is pretty funny, but once you're finished clearing out that room, we're going to go to the doorway, and we're just going to make our way through the hallway. Now, most of this level, with exception of the room we just finished clearing out, and the room with the 2 hunters and the boss fight, we can pretty much just run past. We're just going to run past everything except for those sections, and those sections are the only sections where you have to kill everything. So in that one, we literally just ran past, grabbed the power cell, and just ignored all the enemies, and just placed it in the power source, and we're able to progress through the level, opening the door. Now, as we make our way through the level, we're going to be approaching what I think is probably the hardest section of this level, and that is the 2 hunters. Now, there's going to be 2 different strategies that I'll be talking about. However, on screen, there's going to be just the one strategy involving the skewer. However, I'll be talking about both here. So the first one with the skewer is I use because it is generally quicker, so long as you can manage to survive the hunters long enough. But the rocket launcher one is a little bit more consistent. So the one with the rocket launcher is we're just going to wait until the hunters will generally just start approaching us from where I just was, behind that big glass pane. And as the hunters approach us, we'll just shoot the ground in front of the hunter with the rocket launcher and send them flying away. That way they have to travel all the way back to us just to make any kind of try to attack us. So it's a lot safer because you have 2 shots and you have 2 hunters very conveniently that you can just keep sending away, and you'll slowly whittle them down. And it does take some time to do it this way, which is why I like to do the skewer one personally. But and it keeps things a little bit more interesting for me. It's not as boring. It's a lot more active. But it's a lot more dangerous, and you will die probably a couple times trying to get this one down. Now, on my first playthrough on this, I actually did it in my first try, surprisingly. However, while re-going through it for this footage, I died quite a bit using the skewer route. So, like I said, it's a lot of risk involved, but it is quicker to kill, and I personally find it just more fun to be messing around with it. But the skewer just generally does more damage per shot, and it also doesn't matter what kind of where you hit the hunter at with the skewer. Just so long as you hit them, it'll do a lot of damage. So you're just going to be popping in and out of the cover, shooting each hunter with a skewer, trying to reload, and it takes a while to reload, so you want to be able to make sure you're in a safe spot to sit still for a bit while you're able to reload. And that's one of the main drawbacks with this strategy here. Personally, if you want the safer route, I recommend using the rocket launcher strat. However, you want to keep things more interesting, I do the skewer. Now, another thing to note is there's going to be a lot of explosive canisters that are going to be riddled across the room. You want to use those as soon as possible, and not just because it'll do extra damage, albeit it does help out when you can hit the hunters directly with it, but while you're dashing across the room, if you're next to one of the explosive canisters and a hunter tries shooting at you, it'll just blow up the explosive crate and it'll kill you just right away. So it's a very good idea that you want to get rid of that kind of threat right away and instead just turn it into doing extra damage to the hunter. That way you don't have to worry about it and you've done more damage. You also can utilize all the boxes that are across the room as well as the little deployable shields, as they will provide nice cover while you try to reload your skewer or rocket launcher. And as well as once you get one of the hunters down, this big glass pane wall that's there works as a nice little kiting strategy that you can use against the hunters. So as I just killed this one hunter here, I'm going to actually just use that glass pane wall as well as these boxes behind in order to essentially just keep the hunter from attacking me. You can also use this little corner here. The hunters tend not to follow you into that corner with the big boxes, unless they're like right next to you. Then they'll, obviously start shooting at you. But I like to go back there whenever the hunters are on the opposite side of the room and just use that opportunity to reload, and then I'll pop back out with invisibility. And generally they won't really notice me too much while I'm going back. Now once you finish off killing the hunters, you want to actually go back and pick up your rocket launcher. It's not going to be as big of a deal as it used to be in other levels, but I still prefer the rocket launcher. In all honesty, at this point in the LASO playlist, you can just get away with most other weapons. As the final boss fight, I personally didn't use the rocket launcher very much, only a couple times. But like I said, you can do pretty much whatever weapons you want from here on out, so long as you still have your sword. And again, we're just going to make our way through the level, and we're just going to be running past everything. So once you get to this big room, once we exit this little narrow hallway here, we're going to enter the big room, and we're just going to try and run past everything. Now you want to make sure that you're not spotted in this section here, as if you are spotted when you're going through that first doorway, the grunts will just pull out double grenades and blow themselves up along with you, and you will die. So if you're going to hit someone to get your shields back perhaps, save it for the later room and you'll be just fine. And again, in this giant room here, we're just going to be running past everything. If you need shields, there's plenty of opportunities to just quickly melee one of the grunts or jackals, and you'll be able to get your shields that way. And we're just going to run straight into the door at the end. We don't need to kill anyone in that room. It's very nice. This section, we just activate the bridge. I'm just going to cut ahead as it's a long little mini cutscene that you have to just sit through. But once the cutscene's over, we'll just make our way through again. And again, we're just going to be running through everything. Now this room, there's going to be a couple enemies that might see you right away. You can see I got shot with a disruptor when I first walked in, but we're just going to melee a couple of the enemies here and just rush to the door. Like I said, the only 3 sections in this entire level that you actually need to kill anyone in is the first fight, the hunters that we just did, and the final boss fight. And here we're just going to wait for the Oracle guy to open the door for us. And once that door is open, we'll progress, and the boss fight is coming up next. Again, we're just going to be running through the level here, progressing as you would on a normal playthrough. And once you get to the area where you have to activate the light bridge to progress, you can actually just jump over it. You can activate the light bridge if you want, but I prefer just jumping over it because it's just quicker. You don't have to deal with any little extra things. But we're just going to go up and ride the elevator, and I'll go ahead and just cut ahead here so we don't have to watch this whole thing. And once you get off the elevator, we're just going to make our way through the door. And we're just going to be at another couple double doors that we're going to have to progress through, and then we'll be on to the boss fight. And this boss fight takes a little bit of time and can be a little tricky. However, it's not as bad as you would think it'd be, surprisingly. Alright, so now we're finally into the boss room, and in order to start the boss fight, we're just going to go up to this console and activate the starting cutscene and allowing the boss fight to begin. Now, the boss fight itself is a 3-wave ad fight broken up by the boss itself. And the boss itself is the easiest part. You really don't have to worry too much. It's really just the ads you got to deal with. So all across the room there are going to be doors that you're going to watch out for where waves of banished will be coming out from. The first one's not going to be too bad, just a couple of brutes, skimmers, and some grunts here and there. Overall, not too bad. Just throw your dynamos, stun them out, and take out each one with your sword. Each enemy outside of the brute should only take 1 to 2 hits, and the only thing you should be watching out for are the grenades that they will be throwing. Now, you also kind of want to keep an eye out throughout this entire boss fight for those giant exploding canisters that are just going to be sitting on each of the ramps. Each one of those you don't want to be next to when enemies will throw grenades, or you don't want to hit anyone with your sword while fighting them. Now that we're on to the actual part of the boss fight, the first wave of the boss fight I should say, we're just going to rush at her with our sword. You can use any weapon you want really, but I personally prefer using the sword, as with how often she's dashing around, I found it pretty hard to consistently aim and hit her no matter what weapon I was using. So I prefer just to chase after her with the sword, as well as it helps out with her main ability where she'll throw a plasma-like grenade, like a little light bomb that she throws at us. And the way the tracking for that works is it'll go to your location that you were at when she first threw it. So when you're constantly dashing around, you're going to be avoiding them, which is nice. Now, each of these waves will get progressively harder as more enemies will spawn from each one, and tougher enemies will spawn after each one. The second one, again, is not too bad. Mostly just some jackals, some elites scattered in here this time. And you're going to want to take out the jackal sniper, as once he sees you, you really don't want to constantly get hit by that with how good and consistent their aim is. Again, you really want to utilize those dynamo grenades. I cannot stress how important they are with stunning these waves of enemies while you're going through. Especially in the last phase where there are a ton of enemies that are going to be coming through. And you're going to really want to save all the time you can get by stunning as many of the people you can per grenade, allowing yourself to kill more enemies while they're not shooting at you. Like I said, the boss fight's kind of a joke. You literally just chase her with the sword and deal with her that way. Now, it's actually convenient that we ended up in this spot here, as I actually kind of like starting off the third wave here, as when you're up in this little banister, you can kind of control where the next wave of enemies will spawn, or at least one section of them. So you can see while I'm up here, one of the doors behind me, either to the left, right, or middle below me, will start spawning some of the enemies. So you just pay attention to which one it opens up. I just threw a dynamo as it started and used my rocket launcher and killed all of the enemies except for the elite that was in there, at which point I just finished off with the sword. Now, a lot of elites you got to be real careful for, because as you get close to them, they're going to start throwing their sword out and they're just going to be trying to melee you. And this phase is also difficult, as there's going to be a brute chieftain with a gravity hammer that you're going to want to constantly run away from. And you want to really be careful that he's not doing his big jump lunge attack, because he'll kind of follow you in the air, and you don't want to be close enough to where he can just hit you right away. But you also don't want to be far enough away from him to where he can just jump at you and lunge at you like he just did there. Now, if he does lunge at you, you want to sidestep. You don't want to run away from him, as he will continually gain distance no matter how far away you try to run from him. But he doesn't change direction very well, so if you sidestep him, that's how you do it. Now, once it's just the chieftain, or you can even do this earlier, but once it's just the chieftain like it is here, we're just going to stay kind of close to him and just let him try and melee in general. But once he starts to do his regular just melee swing and not his actual like gravity hammer slam, we're just going to dash backwards and let him miss and hit the air. And then we're going to rush back in, get another sword strike in, and we're going to repeat that process till he's dead. And then we're on to the final wave of the actual boss. Now this one, she's a lot more aggressive, so you got to be more careful about those exploding little grenades she's throwing at us. But like I said, we're constantly using our thruster to evade where she's going. And once you finish finally killing off the boss, you are done. And that is all LASO levels completed. You'll be granted your achievement for completing all the main story missions on LASO difficulty. And we're done. And congratulations on making it this far. It wasn't an easy job. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope these guides were able to help you finish off this LASO achievement, as it was not an easy one. If you liked what you saw here, you can check out my now complete Halo Infinite LASO guide playlist for all the previous levels, as well as my other videos detailing how to get many of the other achievements within Halo Infinite. As always, I'd love to hear any feedback on how I can improve my guides, as well as any tips and tricks you guys have learned to make this run more efficiently. And I'll see you guys in the next guide.